Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Mrs. here. Today we are back with a not really brand new, V deck profile on Victor. Victor is a deck that I've been wanting to play for a really long time. I mean, I really like Victor, but in G it was just too expensive. In V it finally came out, but some cards were just really still too expensive. Kick and Cool Hank and rush it. But after news about the V reprints and people were like, oh no, V's dying, so they sold off a lot of stuff really cheap. I benefited off that, and I managed to build from scratch my own Victor V deck. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking, who cares about V? To a lot of people, V is a dead format. I don't agree with that. It may seem that V is a dead format, and for very good reason, and it's not like the V meta is fun. The V meta is horrible. I would say really bad. But as much as V is bad, well, I still think that normal, casual V to that extent and the non-tier 0 V decks are still really fun to play, and it's such a wide variety of decks, unlike in D where you just have 10. So moving forward, yes, there will still be V deck profiles here and there. You can certainly expect around V collection for me to do a lot more based on what we get in V, but normal other decks that are not from the V collection or just have some support, some promos or something, I'll probably cover it on the channel. For Victor here, it's a relatively simple of a deck to cover, so I just decided now that I have a break in my recording schedule, I might as well take the time to do it. But I think one more thing that I will say is that for the Turnabout, which is coming to the West finally in the Revival collection, the English only set, I will cover a Turnabout deck profile soon. So that's the next major V deck you can expect to see on this channel. So this is just something I could fit in, so I'm just really happy I can do it. So, well, pretty refreshing. And of course, let's start with for Victor as our grade 3. Yeah, that's really it. You just want to be able to ride Victor. If you can't ride Victor, you kind of essentially lost the game. Victor's not anything very powerful. Its skill is just really simple. You counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1 when this unit attacks. Choose one of your rear guards and stand it. If this unit has stood 2 or more times by a card effect this turn, you can gain +1 drive. So it's essentially CB1 SB1, stand 1, and if the unit stood before, you get a drive. But the only catch is that, well, it has to be the second time. So you need something else to stand the other guy, then it works. And of course, as you probably expected, there are 2 skills on this card. The second skill is when placed, look at the top 7 cards of your deck, superior call 1 Extreme Battler from among them. Now, Victor is an Extreme Battler Victor. He has 2 X's in the Extreme, whereas the other regular Extreme Battlers, they don't, they just have 1 X. In the Japanese, it is known as Mecha. I can't really pronounce that. It's deteriorating, but you get what I mean. It's a different name. You can even look at it from the words. So, oh, you can't see that. Yeah. So the different extreme battlers you play in this deck are stuff like Arashid, your Searcher, Do Sledge. We play Gun Balugan, and for my own deck list, I've decided to also play Soul Saucer, which happens to be every Mecha Battler in V. So yeah, but we'll get more into that later on. As you can tell, Victor by itself, he's extremely weak, and that's probably why he's one of the cheapest VRs to end off the V series, which says a lot, if considering the later sets of V was some really, mind-blowing stuff. Blau from the same set as Victor was really good for its price tag, and still is, but the fact that this card is still really cheap for a VR, it says a lot. But it's not a completely trash ass deck. I think it's still pretty good. You just need to get your pieces to get flowing. It's a really piece reliant deck, but when you get the number of combos and the multi attacks on, I assure you it's really very gratifying. Moving on to grade 2s, we play 4 copies of Kick Typhoon. We play 4 copies of Extreme Battler Do Sledge, as I mentioned earlier. And I also play, for good measure, 4 copies of Brutal Jack. I don't have Cool Hank just yet. Cool Hank's being reprinted, so there's no point in me buying Cool Hank. But right now, I also don't really play Cool Hank, at least for now, until I test, maybe a bit more, maybe when the meta shifts more during V call, maybe I could afford to play Ku Hang in my deck, but right now, there's a good reason why I don't have him. So let's just break down what we have. We'll start off with the big boy, which is Kick Kick Typhoon. Kick Kick Typhoon is Nova Grappler's be-all and end-all grade 2. His skills are very simple. If he's placed on a Vanguard circle or an Excel circle, you choose one of your units and it gains 5k until the end of turn. So this is a free 5k you can just throw around for absolute insanely free, which helps, I guess. And then the second skill is what you're really here for. When he attacks, if all the units in your front, in all the circles of your front row are full, you counter plus 1, choose one of your other rear guards and stand it. So this is one of the easiest ways to get a unit to restand. So that's just something for you to keep in mind. It's the fact that you can read the skill is just so generic. It's one of the reasons why Kick is such a expensive but yet really good card for Nova Grappler. I'm kind of sad that they didn't reprint Kick, but they did reprint Hank, so I mean it's not that bad. But personally, I find myself preferring Kick a bit more than Hank, at least for now, and for good reason, which as you go on for the rest of this list, you'll see why. For our grade 2s, I think it's time I address the elephant in the room. It's the one, the only, Brutal Jack. And Brutal Jack is definitely the one that you don't see often in Victor, if not never. This is usually where Cool Hank would stand. And so you'll be wondering, oh, why am I playing Brutal Jack? Brutal Jack is strangely pretty versatile in my opinion. It's not really good, so there's people who won't play it and that's fine. But for me, I just really like Jack because, first of all, it's a really cool card. Secondly, the skills, of course. The first skill is that continuous during your turn. This unit gains 10,000 power. Now, this is on a V, this is on R. So on V, you're swinging for a 19k magic number. On an R, you're a 19k plus beta. It's free, it's consistent, that it's given to you just like that. So first of all, your early game is just really good with Brutal Jack. If you get a Brutal Jack rush off, you just shoot, and it's just 19, or just, I mean if you call 3 Brutal Jacks. But let's assume you ride Brutal Jack, that's still a 19k column they have to deal with on turn 2. And they know that if you are playing Nova Grappler, it means you have minimum multi-attacks, later on the game. So usually when they fight these kind of decks, they're taught by their seniors to guard early. But how are you going to guard early at 19k grade 2? It makes the job a bit harder than it traditionally is, which is one of the reasons why Brutal Jack's in the deck. The second skill of Brutal Jack is a bit complicated, but we'll get into that. Rest 2 of your rear guards, and this unit stands itself. And then, of course, there's one more skill, that is, this unit cannot stand during your stand phase. This is meant to be the V-Series retraining of the whole restrained identity, where Brutal Jack could not attack during your turns. You counter blast 1 and release him into high gear, and then he can attack as an 11k body. So I can see how they tried to, retrain this whole I am limited, but you can free me and I can start doing stuff, which is not bad, but of course a lot of people are like, this is too slow, this is too piece reliant, we don't want it. But here's the catch about Brutal Jack. You can choose 2 units to rest itself for it to stand again. By standing itself, it automatically counts as a card effect stood, which it helps with Victor. It automatically just gives you a +1 in terms of standing, so if you don't have a lot of options on your board, you just use Jack, rest the useless fellas, you swing with Jack, you swing with Victor, you stand Jack back up. So that is one way to do it, but of course, Jack is not very optimal, but there is also one more thing. That is, if you manage to use Jack's skill, you rest 2 units and whatnot, you can also combo it with stuff like Unknown Adamski. Unknown Adamski skill is you counter blast 1, stand one of your units, attack with it, and if the attack fails, you stand it back up. So from the get-go, you instantly just have a 19k direct swing during the main phase, and that is still pretty good. Of course, later on, as you play the matches, either your opponent retires Jack, you intercept Jack away, you have better options, especially when you see the last grade 2, which is meant to be your restanding target. But I still feel that, if you don't get Dose Sledge, who is the last guy, you essentially have nothing big to beat people with. And that is why I choose Jack. Now, one more thing I just need to clarify before I move any further is that people will often say, why not I just pick Pound Mass, the PR? And Power Mass as a PR isn't very expensive either. It's about $3 to $4, so it's not that bad. So I guess that's not bad, right? But the thing is that it is only a rearguard skill. Then when it stands, it gains 10k and your Vanguard gains 10k. But for Brutal Jack, as I mentioned just now, it is already built in as a 19k during turn 2. So you really just get that extra 10k for early aggression, which helps, especially when during the later stages of the game you want to just multi attack and then win. So that is mainly why Brutal Jack is here. It's for the early game push. But like I said, if you're not a fan of that, you can just play Power Mask, you can play Cool Hang. It's cool. Alright, last grade 2 is your restanding target, Extreme Battler Dose Sledge. Dose Sledge's skill is purely hinged on the number of times this unit stands by a card effect. The first time this stands, it gains 10,000 power. The second time it stands, you soul charge 1. The third time it stands, it gains 10,000 power again, and you get Sentinel Restrict. So that means if you manage to stand this unit 3 times by a card effect, you effectively get 4 swings, 3 of which are higher, are 19k and higher. Your last attack will be at least 29k or higher with a Sentinel Restrict. So really, it's free. It's completely free, Dose Sledge, which is why it is the main beatstick of this deck. But as you guessed, it has 0 ways of enabling itself. So you definitely need your restanders, you need your pieces to get it flowing so it can actually work. If not, this thing is just the worst grade 2 by itself. Any constellation is that, first of all, it funds a soul. So as you saw, Victor CB1 SB1, so it kind of nets off Victor's Soul Blast, which helps when you see what else we play in this deck. Secondly, as you probably would have guessed, it's an Extreme Battler, so you can Superior Call it by Victor. So it's not incredibly hard to find your pieces, and it helps, I guess. That really, the Victor skills facilitate this big free beater, but you must be able to actually get the pieces off. So you're very susceptible to control, but if you manage to get the multi-attack off, it's really fun. And for our grade 1s, well, this is where it gets a bit dicey. We play 4 copies of Gun Balagan. We play 4 copies of Soul Saucer. We play 4 copies of the one, the only Arashid. We play 4 copies of, and this is the one that's really controversial, 4 copies of Screaming and Dancing Announcer Shout. And we take 1 copy of Unknown Adamski. So let's actually get through with this. So I'm going to start with Arashid. Arashid is your 13k searcher. Really, it's quite simplistic as that. All it does is just when the unit stands by a card's effect, it gains 5k power. And when it's placed, you open the top 5 cards of your deck, add a grade 3 among them. Discard a card, shuffle your deck. It's really simple. And it's an Extreme Battler. So you can call this by Victor's effect, but you can't use the search effect since it's from hand. But you're still using Victor's skill to gain a free 13k booster. It's appreciated. Then we also play 4 copies of Extreme Battler Soul Saucer. So Saucer's skill is when placed on a Vanguard circle, discard 1 card from your hand to draw a card. So it's a neat 1-for-1 filter. Its second skill is when this unit stands on an XL marker, this unit gains 10k. So it's 23k plus beater on an XL, which is good. And it also helps as a 1-for-1 refund. So why is it that most Victor decks don't play him? It's because he's traditionally very useless. Your XL circles are safe for your stuff like your Dose Sledges or your Kick Typhoons. So there is not much incentive for you to actually play Soul Saucer. But why do I play Soul Saucer? First of all, Soul Saucer, as I mentioned just now, is an Extreme Battler. So with Victor, you are now helping yourself plus even more. If you open the top 7 and you don't get any of your other better Extreme Battlers than this, you still get a free grade 1 8k on board, which undoubtedly is still not bad of a plus. Secondly, of course, is the fact that if it's on the Vanguard circle, it does the little 1-for-1 filter, which helps in aspects in terms of filtering. Thirdly, if you do per se manage to call this to an XL circle, it will punish your opponent next turn, because while you do your multi-attacks with your Dose Ledgers, with Brutal Jacks, you still have a 23k plus beater on an XL circle that you can use for 1 more swing. If not, you still just call it. It's still a grade 1 AK, it can boost, it's pretty effective. And why do I have to mention that it can boost? is because we are going to move on next to two other great ones who will not be boosting. That will be Shout as well as Gun. So I will cover Gun first. Gun skill is when this unit attacks, it's a once per turn skill. You Soul Blast 1. If your Vanguard's Victor, this unit gains 5,000 power. Choose one of your other rear guards and stand it. So now you see why we need the Soul Charge and whatnot, because Victor does have relatively high amounts of soul cost. Ku Heng also costs soul, so that's one more incentive for you to actually know about the soul blasting costs that we have in Victor. It is an extreme battler, so it can be caught by Victor. It is an instant 13k plus beater by itself, so you don't have to worry about, oh, it's an 8k, it's so tiny, it's a little hit. No. It's a 13k plus beater, which it does help. But it's strictly on attack. It's not on boost. So that's something else you need to keep in mind as well. This is something you will be swinging at your opponent at. But generally, considering the fact that it is an extreme battler that also stands a unit, I can't lie, it's still pretty good. So I'm still going to play him in my decks. It's a restander. It's a rare, so he's the cheapest restanding card in this entire deck. So there is no reason to not play him at all. Now we move on to the bit more controversial ones. I'll just tackle Unknown Adamski first. Unknown Adamski, he's tagged in at 1 because I didn't know what else to play in the deck, honestly. And Unknown Adamski is a pretty cool card. I've tested it at 3, 4, 2 copies. 1 copy is just neat enough because it's a good card, don't get me wrong. But I also don't want to spend too many slots on it. Its skill is, as I said just now, when you call this unit, you counter blast 1, choose one of your rear guards, stand it and attack directly, and then after that, if the attack fails, you stand it again. So it's a CB1 just for the extra swing. It helps a bit, but after that, it's a complete vanilla. So yeah, that's why it's mainly at 1. Don't get me wrong, there's some decks that really abuse Unknown Adamski beautifully, like, Azure Dragon, which is still pretty good. But personally, for my Victor deck, I just don't see myself using this very often, so yeah. And lastly, before we move on to the grade zeros, we have Screaming and Dancing Announcer Shout. You may remember Shout from my God Hand deck profile, and you'll be wondering, hey, he's here again. Yes, but this time he's here for an even stronger reason. A lot of people really objected to Shout being in the God Hand list, and for good reason, because, you are removing cards from your deck, you're potentially plusing your opponent, you're losing your front triggers. Yes, that's really bad, and I hear you guys out. It's fair enough of an argument. But why is Shout being played in Victor? It's very simple. First of all, you get to add cards to your hand. Since you're looking for stuff like Victor, and it's a grade 3, as long as you're not playing against Gear Chronicle, or Aqua Force, or anything that's a grade 4 or higher, if you check a Victor, you keep him, and you want your Victors, so take them. Secondly, if you get a lot of your grade 2 pieces and your opponent gets grade 1s or 0s, you get to keep your multi-attackers and your restanders and whatnot. They just get soul charges. If you get your grade 1s, grade 1s are good. If you get grade 0s, if he gets a grade 0 too, you get a free shields for both of you. And chances are the extra plus does you more than the opponent. Now, for the elephant in the room, which is, so what if your opponent gets a higher grade and they get to keep the card? You soul charge. Exactly, you soul charge, and that is something Victor really needs. You gotta need soul. So no matter how this flows, you still gain. You rush out for potential soul charge or potential free drop into a really good quality piece. And as you've seen from this deck, the quality of Victor's pieces really help because you just need as many of those pieces as possible in played correctly, albeit, but you just need as many pieces as possible to win. And Shout from as early as turn 1, if you can get him to set 1 copy on the field, you can just start going ham on it every turn for a potential free plus. Or it's not really potential, it's a guaranteed free plus even. It's just a matter of soul or hand. So that is why Shout is still being played in Victor. Yes, I know that, if it goes to soul, your opponent gets to keep a card in hand, you remove 1 trigger. But at the end of the day, just think of it as soul charging a trigger. When you soul charge a trigger, you may be like, oh, I lost a trigger. But other people will say, oh yes, I'm stacking soul for my requirements or for my costs. And that is what Shout is used for in this aspect. Now we move on to the grade zeros. We play Battle Razor, the best starter for Nova Grappler. We play 8 crits here, play 4 draw, and we play 4 heal. really standard lineup personally. 8 crits is because you do want that aggression. That 4 draws is because you do want to draw. But you don't need like 6 crit, 6 draw, because with the amount of self-sufficiency the deck has in the form of Victor itself, as well as stuff like Screaming and Dancing Now as a Shout, gathering your pieces isn't a big concern enough that you need to fill your deck with 5k vanilla shields. So generally speaking, you can still go ahead and play the 8 crits for extra pressure for your restanding units, which does help. Heals because you want to heal, so really self-explanatory on my end. So that it's about it. That is Extreme Battler Victor. I really hope you enjoyed this video, because this is something I just wanted to cover for a while, but I just never had the time to, I guess. I built this deck not very long ago, but I just never had the time to cover it with all the D-decks and whatnot. Like I mentioned, I think way before, while Vanguard was still going through that hard times of different formats and struggling to adjust to it, I still said that I will be creating deck profiles for all 3 formats, and Victor is the first of a V format deck to do in a very long time. So I personally just feel very refreshed to do something like this again. It's back to something you're more familiar with. But thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, do the normal. Share this video, because honestly, especially with V collection coming up, your friends will be like, hey, I want to play V2, albeit I'm not interested in 16 crit Valkyrian, 16 crit DOTX, Valkyrian, God Hand, not a God Hand, God, it's not meta. What else is meta? Man, I actually forgot. Prisms. Who could forget Prisms? I actually forgot Prisms for like 2 minutes. Yeah. If you're not interested in playing a meta deck in V, just pick up one of those relatively still good V decks, which there are plenty of, as long as you know how to use them. People who say decks are bad, more likely or not, don't really know how to use it unless they really tested it, which not everyone really tests it to begin with. So that's just how I feel about it. So thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.